Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicole Fernandez. I'm the Maternal and Infant Health Project Manager at Wayside Recovery Center. Wayside Recovery Center is located in Minneapolis and St. Paul. We service women who choose to bring their children with them to therapy. This work has been happening in our organization for over 60 years. We desire to empower women and families, and we look to reduce stigma amongst women in our community who are experiencing substance use disorder or opioid use disorder. Today, our maternal infant health series is sponsored by SAMHSA and a state opioid response 2 grant from Minnesota Department of DHS. As always, they are not in any way, how do I want to phrase that? They're not making any endorsements here, but they are providing the funding for which that we can do this work. I would like to turn it over to Miss Ananeicia Williams and Shanice Wilson. They will do their introductions for our session today. I hope some of you were in the previous session that we had a month earlier on Postpartum is Forever. And so this is part 2 of that discussion. And if you did not get a chance to, because I did try to send out, when we announced this one, I did send out the recording link. Please feel free to go to the Wayside Maternal Health YouTube and you can watch the previous session. I'm looking forward to the conversation and presentation today. And thank you all for coming. I'll turn it over to Ms. Ananeicia Williams.
Thank you again for having us. For those who are joining for the first time, excited to engage with you. If you're returning for part 2 series, really excited to go a little deeper in how we connect that mental health aspect to that physical aspect, especially because it's Black Breastfeeding Week. I am Dr. Ananeicia Williams. My background is a licensed clinical social worker, and I have the great pleasure of being able to hold moms in regards to their mental wellness. I also do some work around advocacy and policy in my state of Kentucky. I am located in Louisville. I have the great pleasure of also doing reproductive justice work with an organization called Sister Song Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective. And so feel free to reach in after this and we can continue having conversations together and be in community. But I want to keep my introduction really short and sweet because there's some great content that Shanice and I want to get into, and I'll hand it over to Shanice.
Thank you so much, Anna. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. And like Anna said, to get to engage with you all today. My name is Shanice Nelson. I am an IBCLC candidate. I will be sitting for my exam very soon. My background is in maternal and child health. I hold a Bachelor of Science surrounding that topic. And I do a lot of work around research. And I too get the opportunity to hold mamas by facilitating breastfeeding groups, new parent spaces that are safe to just unlock and begin to unravel a lot of the challenges that come with that. And Anna and I are going to talk about that more today.
Thank you, Shanice. And so I'm going to begin to share my screen with you all, and we will get started. So again, as Nicole said, that this is part 2. So this continuation of Postpartum is Forever. We were intentional with this title because oftentimes, especially when we see in policy, they are saying that postpartum is that first 6 to 8 weeks. And so we do want to be intentional to reshape the language to allow people to understand that this parenting stage is an ongoing process, just like the development of our children. And so this particular session is going to really talk about how do we connect that mind and body to the journey of parenting. And then some of our goals today, we want to identify breastfeeding and psychological effects, but we also want to do an analysis of the process of breastfeeding mentally and physically within parenting. And so whether someone identifies as male, as female, non-binary, we are intentional with also being inclusive of those individuals too. And we also want to discuss how different identities link and contribute to inequalities, and inequities, I'll add as well, in breastfeeding and mental health. So we will be highly focusing on those groups from marginalized spaces and communities, so particularly Black communities, as it is Black Breastfeeding Week, as we stated, which started on August 25th, and it actually ends tomorrow, but this work is forever. So when we're thinking about this aspect of the journey of parenting, and primarily when we're thinking about these bodies preparing for breastfeeding, we have to think about that this is a mental part of these individuals where they really have to think about, what is my birthing plan? What are the things that I need? Who do I need to be included in this experience? Something I wanted to highlight is, if you see on the screen right now, you see these phrases, and these phrases you may be familiar with when individuals are talking about breastfeeding. So breast is best, it supports bonding, breastfeeding is a mother's gift to baby and herself. And then that famous one, and I've heard this so much, especially in hospital settings, give your baby that liquid gold. But are we understanding the context that those languages have for these parents, and thinking about, this is primary? That can put a lot of pressure on individuals, thinking that I have to do this because according to society, this is the best thing to give to my baby. And while we want to promote breastfeeding, are we considering different options may be needed based off of where that individual is in their life? And so thinking about nursing, there's also this connection to mental wellness. So according to Bora et al. 2014, there are considerations that this birthing individual is already beginning to analyze and process in their preparation for breastfeeding. So what is my intention and how I want to feed my baby, whether that is breastfeeding, whether that is I may have to supplement and actually have formula. Also want to think about potentially, if I've, birthed before, have I had supply issues? What can that look like for me? We also want to think about analyzing being at home and having to return to work. And we'll go a little deeper in that as well. And then what about medical conditions? Not only if the baby potentially has medical conditions, but that birthing person, are we assessing their history physically and mentally to be able to be in this experience? And then also, again, this language that we put out there in society, it can put a lot of pressure on individuals to be able to uphold this experience that they're about to go on. What's important, anything that we do within especially maternal and child health, we have to acknowledge the history that has occurred within maternal and child health. And so this may be a picture that you've seen before, but this is wet nursing. And so really being intentional to uplift the historical context of how breastfeeding has had implications in Black bodies. And so what we want to think about, what was happening with reproductive health during the history was not only dehumanizing and exploiting, but it was also going against those individuals' bodily autonomy and human rights. So we have to actually understand the history of reproductive rights, because it impacts postpartum care and how we assess individuals. Noting that the experience also has ripple effects is information for us, of you who are on the call, that are providers or that you're advocates. How are we actually understanding that generational context as well, to really understand how that can impact an individual mentally and physically? So when we think about Black bodies and the racial disparities, we also have to think about that relation in maternal and child health. In particular, there are disproportionate rates when we think about preterm birth, also when we think about infant mortality. But are we taking the time to say there is a historical narrative that is rooted in some of these disparities that we are seeing today? Oftentimes in the settings that I am in, that historical piece is not discussed or talked about. We will talk about decolonizing practices and, dismantling, but you also have to acknowledge the history, especially within reproductive health and healthcare as well. When we're also thinking about unwriting the history, I want us to think about, do we take the time to assess that individual and where they come from? So acknowledging and sharing about their trauma can also impact how they engage, not only in breastfeeding, but things that we are requiring these birthing individuals to do in the birthing process, during these pregnancy stages. And so it's important to note, when we're thinking about them, do we think about comfortability? Are we allowing them to do a body scan in regards of, does it feel okay for me to touch you here? What does this look like if you are going to have a vaginal birth? What does this look like if you had to have a cesarean? These are things that we should be partnering with these birthing individuals and assessing their history, because we do not know if we are going to trigger something or impact in how they engage with us as we're trying to provide services to them. Something I want to highlight that Woods 2010 did some research on is disassociation. So really that is about the separation that we have to an item, a thing, a person, because it's related to a trauma. So when we're thinking about the body, especially those who are breastfeeding, they may be successful or not successful. So sometimes we can see success even though trauma may be in the body, because they have completely disassociated themselves from their body. So because there may have been sexual abuse that occurred, I have no connection to my breast, nor do I feel anything to that. So I may be able to nurse, but then there may be individuals that this is a reminder of when I was violated. This is a reminder of me not feeling as if I have choice in what I have to do in regards to feeding my baby. Particularly in the study I wanted to highlight for you all is that when Dr. Karen Woods was actually doing the study, what she found was that the breast was connected to how individuals was connecting their relationship, especially in their birthing process. She also noted that it was seen that the abuse that occurred with these individuals was connected to how they were remembering, or things were coming up for them, especially if they suppressed those thoughts. So what it's really important for us to do as providers when we are serving these individuals and their family, how are we having conversations that are hard and challenging, but to ensure that there is care provided in the process of the birthing experience for individuals. And as we think about these things and having a collection of not only that individual's history, what they want in their choice in birth process, we have to understand that this is a birthright. Everyone should have access to choose how they wish to be in their birthing process, feed their children, parent. And at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Shanice.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was great information. And just to jump right in as about breastfeeding being your birthright, ultimately, I think what we have to get back to the core of understanding is breasts were created to nourish a baby. And a lot of times in American culture, we often see breasts displayed with everything except a baby: alcohol, entertainment events, tobacco, different things. And so I think it's very important for us to just hone in on what breasts were designed to do. And I think when we start in that place, that gives us a foundation to build upon, to be able to promote and support breastfeeding. It's anywhere, especially in public breastfeeding is one of the biggest strategies to begin to normalize breastfeeding in our culture, in our communities. We have to see more of that. And in doing so, what does that look like at the state level, at our local level? So I know here in the state of Kentucky, you do have the right to feed your baby and or express milk as a product of breastfeeding. anywhere that you are authorized or permitted to be. We also need to take in consideration our workplaces. I know Anna briefly touched on returning to work. That often poses the biggest threat to breastfeeding when individuals have to go back into environments that are not promoting or cultivating the fact that they want to breastfeed. So I also want to take this time to just highlight the PUMP Act on a federal level, which does require certain employers to provide reasonable break time as well as a hygienic space for you to begin to express milk for your baby's needs. We can go to the next slide, Anna. Thank you. And while we talk about that, nutrition is a substantial part of that. There's so many things that happen between pre-pregnancy and your postnatal journey with your baby. Your body undergoes several changes, and according to the CDC, you need anywhere from 330 to 400 additional calories a day to sustain breastfeeding. Your body's working overtime to continue to make the milk that you need to nourish your baby. And just to put that into a bit of perspective, on average for individuals who are not pregnant and are not breastfeeding, that could look like approximately 2,000 calories a day. We're talking about adding an additional 300 to 400 calories to that. We can go to the next slide, Anna. As we discuss nutrition and all the changes that will take place in a short window of time, most individuals are returning to work around that 6-week mark. And that's generally the amount of time that it takes to begin to establish a healthy milk supply for a long-term journey. And that's as long as that journey looks like for each individual. Listed here on your screen, I've listed some common supplements that are known to support the postpartum journey. Certainly speak with your healthcare provider to find out if any of these could be of benefit to yourself or to your clients, and know that you have support. I also want to highlight for individuals who are living in food deserts. From a community level, I would challenge you all to think about what does access look like? So if you are serving clients and individuals who live in spaces where they may not have access to fresh foods, what resources are available? What options and opportunities do they have? And if there aren't any, then how can we begin to come together as providers, as educators, to begin to create resources to address that barrier? You can go with the next slide.
Yes. And before I go forward, I also want to add in that mental aspect. When we're thinking about nutrition with these individuals in this postpartum stage, there is a correlation, especially when we're thinking about individuals who may be struggling with postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. Those things and the symptoms in regards to how they're reacting could be something that's impacting their milk supply. So for those who are assessing, if you're integrating the Edinburgh, this is great information to be able to share with those individuals who may be scoring high on that postnatal scale, to talk about what does it look like as far as, are you eating enough in a day? Oftentimes I hear individuals say, like, there's so much going on, I don't even think I ate today. And so as a community with a network, we can do meal trains for these individuals to ensure that they're getting nutritional value, or they're getting access, as Shanice said, in regards to these food deserts. Something that's important to note that I talked about in the part 1 series is this postnatal depletion. And so individuals really just feeling exhausted in this postpartum stage. And so there's some things that we can do in regards to how we integrate and really talk about nutritional value for these birthing individuals. And so can we connect them to resources in the community that they may be able to use if they have food stamps, or if they may be able to have a garden and access that? And how do we take care of one another in the community? Community care is so vital during this point where we are having these birthing individuals during this postpartum stage, which really could potentially combat some of these disproportionate rates that we're seeing as far as infant mortality, maternal mortality, if we really ensure that we are putting a lot of our resources, a lot of our work in this postpartum stage, just like we do during that pregnancy stage as well. And so something to also think about, meal tracking for these individuals. And then also, if we are assisting parents in thinking about what time did I feed baby, are we asking them to think about, well, what time did I also feed myself? Or like, how am I feeling as far as my volume and energy too? So it's important that we don't forget about these individuals during this stage as well.
Thank you. So as we, again, continue to really emphasize that 6 to 8 week postpartum period, returning to work comes with so many challenges and so many changes. And for a lot of people, it's just a change in routine. You've been at home with your baby, having the opportunity to bond without necessarily watching a clock. And so transitioning back into work, what a lot of individuals don't know is that between 6 to 8 weeks, infant fussiness usually begins to peak around that time. And when individuals do not have prior breastfeeding education, a lot of times it is interpreted as my infant is rejecting me. My milk supply is not sufficient. And so I just wanted to highlight that infant fussiness does peak between 6 to 8 weeks postpartum. And then when we're coupling that with the demands of returning to work, whatever those work demands may look like, that's oftentimes a really critical period to just ensure that we're holding mamas, we're creating those safe spaces, we're providing the support to encourage them to continue to breastfeed if that is their desire to do so, because that's when we see a lot of people stop breastfeeding or begin to mixed feed, or who want to completely switch over to formula. And their reason being is not anything that has to do with their production or their supply itself, but more so a lack of education and coupled with the demands of returning to work. Also, according to the Mayo Clinic, they do a lot of really great research. So I would encourage you all to seek them out as a resource for maternal health information as well. But they talk a lot, and they have a really great series on 4-month sleep regression. It can be a game changer. A lot of parents go out of their way to try to get their infants to sleep 8 to 12 hours a day, which oftentimes is not realistic. And then if they do, they hit that 4-month mark and we're kind of back to square one again. And parents think there's something that they've done wrong, and it isn't. There's nothing you've done wrong. Your infant is still establishing their biological clock, and that can come with its own set of challenges. I think many of us can turn into toddlers without, adequate sleep. But I definitely want to highlight that. And Anna, I'm finished with this one.
Okay. I also just want to add that in this mental health stage too, so like if we think about this as the 4th trimester with postpartum, this is oftentimes where we see a lot of anxiousness arise in parents because they are trying to figure it out. So what is it going to look like with this new schedule of integrating work, but also home life into things? This can be a high stressor, but this could also be an opportunity for us as providers where we really step in and hold these families and think about what are certain plans that we can begin to implement for them. One suggestion I have is, can we kind of like slowly increase how they may think about returning to work? So you may have to assist them with thinking about, okay, what is my driving time going to be going to work, and kind of thinking about those considerations from maybe I'm dropping that child off at childcare facility or to another person that is going to be providing that. What's come up for me. So you may have to do some role playing with them too, because what I have seen parents do is hyperventilate. They become overwhelmed with these thoughts of what's going on with my child. I don't know, especially if I'm trying to still provide food in regards to I'm pumping, I'm breastfeeding. I may be having a lot of anxiousness, and that's impacting my milk supply, but we really have to ensure that we really wrap around these services and wrap around this care, because this is probably the highly stressed time for parents because there's also no policies in place in most states to protect them. So Parental Leave Act, this is our time as providers, if you can, based off of where you work, really engage in advocacy and talk about what are our policies and procedures that we have for these individuals that may have had maternal leave. Are we allowing them to ease back into the work? Are we allowing safe spaces where they can go and pump? Are we allowing childcare in our facility? Like, what do we do to really ensure that these parents are able to parent safely and enjoyably? And the other thing we have to think about is we have to figure out plans for these individuals, because in many of our states, people are being forced to parent because of abortion access, which is again related to reproductive justice. If we are going to put policies and restrictions and bans in place that is going to put individuals in the position to parent, then we have to increase these procedures and how we support them to parent in safe and sustainable communities and networks as well.
And something else I wanted to just add on to that, as we just discussed as providers, how we can show up. I definitely want to lift childcare providers as well, because one thing that I hear often is, I wish that my childcare provider was breastfeeding friendly. I wish I could just go in and breastfeed my baby, before I have to go to work or in the middle of the day on my lunch break, things that just promote breastfeeding and make that connection a little more seamless for parents. Jumping right into this slide, body image. It's almost a taboo topic, but it's inevitable because so many changes in the body take place, again, between that pre-pregnancy and postnatal phases. I want us to introspectively look at individuals' backgrounds, what experiences have they had. Oftentimes, I have come in contact with several individuals who had body dysmorphia prior to pregnancy. Childbirth only seemed to exacerbate those things. So just making sure we're holding space for individuals to feel safe in their bodies, for them to feel supported in their bodies, and to begin to understand the changes that come with childbirth as well as breastfeeding. Something that I would like to highlight as well, for example, is women who have larger breasts. Oftentimes, breast size, individuals assume that breast size is associated with the quantity of milk that you're able to make. And there is not a correlation between breast size and the amount of milk an individual is able to make. Make sure that we're also holding our clients and finding out what are their concerns, what are the things that are making them anxious. I've seen several women that are intimidated, that feel like, oh my goodness, I woke up and my milk came in and now my breasts are several sizes larger than what they were. That's a bit intimidating because my baby is so small. How do I receive the proper education? Who is going to tell me what to expect in these short intervals and windows of time? Something else to go right along with that as well is in our hospitals with our staff, we want to make sure that we are fitting individuals for their equipment. Do they have the proper size flanges and things that they need to be successful if they choose to begin their breastfeeding journey with pumping over direct skin to skin contact with their baby for whatever their reason might be? So just making sure that we are considering everyone as an individual and what their personal needs are and experiences have been.
And from a mental aspect, this is oftentimes where we may see some insecurity come up as well for these birthing individuals and their partners. We also may begin to hear them talk about, shame and guilt in regards to, I may choose that because my body is shifting and changing so much, I don't want to breastfeed, or I don't want to partake in certain things because I feel like now having this other individual as an attachment to me, it's impacting me and how I understand myself. understand what this parenting journey is like. And so we have to hold space for individuals to really relearn themselves in this postpartum stage as well. And we also have to support, especially these parents that are co-parenting or whether they're still together, that intimacy of things within the relationship, those things come up as well. And so how are we allowing these individuals to talk through that, as far as like, my body doesn't feel like mine anymore, and so I do not feel a connection to my partner and wanting to be intimate. These are things that is so important and vital, that becomes stressors, that becomes highly anxiety provoking to these individuals. And oftentimes as providers, are individuals that are hitting, at the pediatrician, and we're checking in with baby, we're oftentimes not checking in with these parents to see emotionally and mentally, these are the things they're processing in their mind. So how can we integrate support groups? How can we also be just assessing? Because at the end of the day, what they're holding and storing in their mind is also going to connect to how they feel in regards to this journey in parenting and their connection and bonding with this baby. Which takes us to collaborative care. And I'll let you start this off, Shanice.
Okay, absolutely. So collaborative care is one of my favorite things to do, is to go out and figure out, how do you partner with the people that are already around you, with the organizations that are already around you? Are they serving the demographic and the audience that you have the expertise or knowledge or something that they may need? In the ways that I like to show up in my community, I facilitate new parent support groups alongside with other facilitators that have maternal health backgrounds as well. And there are opportunities for individuals to practice getting out of the house with their baby. That is one of the top reasons that we hear a lot of anxiousness with new parents is, oh my goodness, there's all the things. Did I grab the diaper bag? Did I put everything I needed in it? Did I get the stroller? Am I buckling the car seat correctly? All of these things. So it offers them opportunities to practice those things and to come into a space with someone else who also has an infant that is under 12 months of age and is able to relate to having a lot of those worrisome thoughts or anxious thoughts about all the things. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so on the screen, you'll see off to the side, it says check in. At periods of time, because postpartum is forever, if we can figure out a way to check in with these families. So if it is at the pediatrician appointment, because right after birth, baby's scheduled to see that doctor immediately, whereas it's 6 weeks before that birthing individual is following up with care. We can already have entry points where we're checking in to see how these individuals are doing, so we're seeing that baby may be in, wellness in a good state, but we have to hold that birthing individual. And it's a relation to, we get to hold both when we hold that birthing individual as well. With this collaborative care, when we see these disproportionate outcomes that are happening in maternal and child health, there's a lot of conversations that happen about what field is the best to invest in, and a lot of work being done in silos. And so you may hear conversations about, midwifery is the way to go, doulas are the way to go, lactation is the way to go, the doctor. Really, this work cannot be done in silos. It is going to take interdisciplinary model where all individual hands on deck. And so the doula, the midwife, the doctor, the lactation support, the mental health therapist, the case manager, it doesn't even matter if it is that person that that family walks through the door, that immediate person as a receptionist is just checking in and saying, hello, how are you all doing? Those are entry points to engage these families and also just assess what they need. It also helps us build rapport. It also helps us connect the story, because some of us as providers may be getting more information than the other provider is. And so something that here in Kentucky that Shanice and I do, we're able to participate in collaborative care. So if there is a client that we share, whether that client started off with Shanice first or myself, we can both, with the client's permission and of course doing release of information, begin to work together as a team in ensuring not only mentally and physically we can provide that individual's and that family's needs, but we're assessing what's missing. What's the gap? Who do we need to tap in, plug in as well? Because it really takes all of us when we're thinking about this postpartum stage. And what I have found with parents, a lot of this pressure to know and be in the know of things when it comes to parenting, they may feel afraid to voice that. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to navigate that. I don't even know what's best in regards to this new stage that I'm in with parenting. And whether this is their first or their fifth kid, it's still a new experience because every baby is different. Every pregnancy, birthing experience is different. We should still be providing services throughout that continuation of care. Anything else you would like to add, Shanice, as we begin to, wrap things up in this session?
Absolutely. Another thing that I would like to share is we just consider that we're working with individuals that sometimes don't know what they don't know. And even if they do, again, like Anna said, those experiences can be different. I would like us to just take a look at like, what are their resources? Where are they getting their information that is inadvertently shaping their perspectives and their perceptions of what parenthood or motherhood or breastfeeding should look like for themselves? I know that we're now living in a high climate time with internet access to social media. And I just want us to continue to stay reminded that sometimes that information is one person's experience, and that's beautiful and it's lovely, but it may not always be evidence-based. So just tapping in and seeing where our clients are getting their information from can kind of help give us a heads up and a foot in the forefront, honestly, of just to say, hey, how can we combat some information that may not necessarily be true, or that just may be having a negative impact on their mental health or just thought processes of what to expect in the beginning and early stages of parenthood?
Yes. And as you saw, the before slide was just some references if you all want to follow up and continue with some of these readings and research. But then this slide is just allowing you, if you all want to connect further and have conversations or even talking about, even though we're in different cities and states, how do we ensure that across states, we are doing some of these same things in regards to frameworks and models, some stuff we may not know that you all are already implementing. So community and collaborative care is very important. And now we want to open it up for questions and comments and just engage in dialogue with you all as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ananeicia Williams. Forgive me. For some of you who don't know, she recently defended her dissertation and has achieved that esteem. And I am one to always honor that hard work and dedication. So I just want to shout you out right now. And it was a pleasure to meet you, Miss Shanice, and I appreciate your wisdom that you have shared in this space today. And I just really appreciated being a person who is new to this space in the last few years in terms of public health around maternal health. And as always, you always present new information and new perspectives and ways to sit with knowledge that we may have, right? And the new knowledge that we need to embrace. So I have put in the chat, there were some comments as you were speaking. So I'm going to go back a little bit to that. And then those of you who are still in the audience with us, we still have about a good solid 12, 13 minutes. Please share any of your reflections or thoughts in the chat as well. So Christine shared that the Hmong community allows their mothers to only feed baby and rest for the first 2 months. And she was just stating that she wished we all could take our cue from that. I'm not familiar with other cultural groups, but I know in the African American community, there are some things that we do, or even when I had my first daughter, not to leave the house the first 2 months, not to have baby around a lot of people in community, to allow us to have that nesting time and support, and really limiting to very immediate family members, which also kind of is off-putting to some, but it is honoring that time. Christine also asked that when you talk about advocating, would you bring up FMLA?
So one thing I want to go back to is just communities and culture. Something about our, unfortunately, just, United States, as much as it's a melting pot, there's so many different varieties of cultures, ethnicities. We're not very supportive of integrating those cultures in regards of how we practice and the work that we do. I would even say considerations as far as how people see healthcare holistically. We do not accept that. So oftentimes we're suppressing people and their cultures to be able to do what they know is best for them. And then we're seeing how sometimes they are trying to integrate American culture into how they do things, or that just within their home, they feel safe and they will do those. So how can we as a collective in our spaces say, your culture is welcome. Can you teach me how I can support you in this? Because we're not meeting people where they are. We're trying to get them to conform what we say is best practice, evidence-based practice. And it takes us doing lots of research and understanding these cultures and allowing that individual to teach us. That's humility.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to help us. We think we're so culturally competent and we don't take the time to take a step back and say, hey, I don't know. I'm willing to learn from you.
Mm-hmm.
And something else I would also like to tag on to that, I read that comment in our chat box as well, and I have a lot of appreciation for that. In a lot of my studies and research, what I came to find is that they also do that a lot in Asian cultures as well, where it's a very huge deal to have that sitting in or that resting in period for those first 8 weeks postpartum. And I would just like to highlight, as Anna was saying, we do a lot of things differently in American culture. I think it's important to establish first and then make sure that individuals have access to postpartum doulas. It's inevitable care. I'm a mom of 3 that are all under the age of 7, and I was not aware of what a postpartum doula was until just about 3 years ago. And so knowing what I know now, had I known that then, that's the support that I would have needed, because I know, especially when we talk about marginalized communities, a lot of individuals feel like I do not have the support. I don't have the individuals who have the time availability to be able to show up and support my postpartum needs in those first 8 weeks. And that's where doulas have an opportunity to come into that space and assist you, whether that's with your laundry. Again, Anna mentioned meal trains earlier, just different things that free up your time to be able to relax and recover.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicole, you also brought up Christine's comment about FMLA, and yes, that is an option, but I do want us to highlight that during FMLA, individuals are not paid. And so that's why we really want to get policy implemented in regards to state, local, nationally, that we are taking care of these families, because think about the high stress we're going to create if they cannot take care of their basic needs, food, housing. We're going to see this ripple effect, and it leads to so many things. So even if, let's say, policy has not implemented the Parental Leave Act, what are some of these organizations doing for their employees to be progressive and say, you know what? We realize that when we take care of you, you show up better, you get things done. Do you all have some advisory board that you could start so you can begin having these conversations with HR and talk about, even if it's 2 weeks, it's a start, something to start to really wrap around services. Even if they offer childcare, can I go down the hall and go peek in on my baby?
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather have that than when you offer us pizza to celebrate some of the goals that we met. Put money in the pot to take care of us in this postpartum stage.
I was just thinking about if you could say a little more about dads during the postpartum period. Recently, just even as this weekend, I was with Dr. Moore for Chocolate Milk Day, and I was at the wayside table and I was sharing information, and he was like, "Well, what about dads? You know, what do you have for dads?" So can you just share a little bit about, in terms of support, both you and Shanice, around where you see that we can be more progressive, also advocating for dads?
Absolutely. So we're based in Louisville, Kentucky. We will share that there are fatherhood initiatives in our city, but there's not enough. So we have 502 Fathers, and we have some other groups that is focusing on fathers. What we need to consider to really amplify the supportive needs of fathers is when we think about postpartum depression, it impacts 1 in 10 moms. It's a correlation with dad that it impacts 1 in 7. There is a highly susceptible rate for a dad to experience postpartum depression if that other individual is experiencing it too. What we also are not highlighting is that it's going to look different in men than it does in women. And so where we oftentimes may say, oh, she's just overly emotional, she's, having a hard time as far as like that connecting, that may come out for men as far as in their sexual behavior. It may come out as far as the choices that they're making and increasing like gaming and kind of disconnecting from baby as well, not being really present, but we're not assessing men as well. And so how do we make it welcoming? Oftentimes when we're talking to that person, it's always the woman. Are you talking to both parents when you're talking about this baby? Because the thing that I hear from men is they feel dismissed as well. Anything you would add, Shanice?
For sure. Definitely right on your last sentence there. I oftentimes feel like that men don't feel like they're being spoken to, like you just said. When we're in these pediatrician appointments, lactation consultations, it's kind of like they're a fly on the wall, but they're there. And so one of the things that I like to raise for men is like, well, what can I do? And me and Ananeicia have these conversations where I explain to her that I oftentimes hear like, well, she grew the baby and she makes the milk. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to show up? And I oftentimes encourage individuals to take those assessments during the pre-pregnancy or during the pregnancy phase, connect with individuals, connect with one another, ask those questions about, how do you need to be supported? What does that look like? And then also leaving opportunity for your partner or your loved one to change their mind, because what you think you need during pregnancy may look completely different. So I would encourage just keeping open communication, making some lists of things, doing the small things. I often like to ask individuals, sit in their space and look through their lens for a second. What would drive you nuts? And oftentimes that's usually a pretty grounding place to start. I know that's not an end all be all for everyone. So certainly communication, I would say, is top tier.
Thank you. When I say that too, I know what is very important is for us to ask our clients, our patients, who is your family? How do you identify, right? Is it a partner, a kinship relationship? It could be, your mother has passed. This is my stepmom or whomever, but really to get in the practice of asking who those kinship relationships are, to be respectful of the care. And again, Shanice, a bingo, a light bulb. Those things can change during this whole journey. And let's not get caught up in, well, you said this, right? Where sometimes we can be rigid. This is all about the change journey. So there's quite a bit. So I'm going to try to read a couple of other things. So Sarah says that she really appreciates the scientific fact you shared about nutrition and myths regarding breast size and being unable to breastfeed. That was another key point for me as well. Then we have Kari, who says many cultural groups support postpartum practices focus on healing for birthing parent and baby. One way some of us are working to support this in the U.S., particularly for immigrant parents, is through the 40-day project. I'm not familiar with that. It's University of Minnesota. So I'm going to look that up. So the 40-day project, and anyone else interested, it is in the chat. And then Christine said men often feel like they are sperm donors.
To that point too, this is what I think this is an opportunity for coaching, you know, because I think we can be misinformed that, you know, men have feelings and they have thoughts of this birthing process. And so any time that we can say, hey, dad, you want to come over here and sit, or do you want to come learn how to do this, especially if you're a birth worker, and you can say, hey, do you want to see how, I know Shanice, you may do this, do you want to see how you can help her express that milk more? Like, you can come massage her, you can come sit behind her, soothe her. Like, there's so many things that we just don't open up that opportunity for them to engage in.
And I just want to highlight too, as we talk about mental health, is that when we're supporting dad and we're equipping, and whether that's dad or that's just a support person or someone else who is related, whoever is spending the most amount of time with this mother and this baby, we want to make sure that we are equipping them to be able to support and to assist her. Because again, when we look at statistics, this is where we see those numbers of postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum psychosis, and all these different things that come up. A lot of it is rooted in mothers feeling like they have to keep this cape on. I have to do all the things. I have to be perfect. It show up in all these various different ways that sometimes may not all be realistic at once. And so knowing that they have someone that they can kind of lean on and ping pong some activities and tasks and different things off of can minimize a lot of those conditions as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you both so much. I'm looking at the clock. We're at 12:56. So we are going to be respectful of time. We want to thank both of you for an amazing presentation. We also want to remind everyone about that CDC report, right? That CDC report that just came out. It talked about almost, I think it was 47% felt discriminated against. So if we are dealing with such high numbers, and there are several other categories that they surveyed, it is telling us that there's so much more for us to improve through first, second, third, and this fourth trimester. But what I loved and appreciated, Dr. Ananeicia, when she entitled this Postpartum is Forever, it really shifted my thinking about how we have thought about it, and just even my personal family, right? How we've missed some things over the years and just really not considered some of these needs and this wisdom. And so I totally appreciate this. I'm almost wanting to make another ask right now while we're recording, but I will give us some time to just really take this in and reflect on the information that we heard today. I hope the guests that are on today will consider joining us next month with Dr. Jill Woodnick. And as always, we thank you for your participation. Please share with your networks and friends. And we wish you a peaceful and a safe and a purposeful afternoon. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon, everyone.